welcome to the VET S.O.S podcast. Remember, don't drown the sea of transition. Grab the VET S.O.S lifeline. VET S.O.S is brought to you by the Who You Know Network and proud members of the Prairie Deck community. Today, we're sitting down with John Bates, a speaking expert who has been working with the military and veteran community for years. Once again, Keith, got you riding shotgun, brother. How you doing today?
Living the dream as always, brother. How you doing?
Very nice, very nice. Always a good day when we get to sit down and talk to people trying to help our community.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking
Let's
forward to this episode for sure.
All right, let's jump into it. We got John K. Bates. He's a globally recognized leadership communication expert, speaker, and coach. As the founder of Executive Speaking Success, he has worked with top organizations like NASA, Navy EOD, NORAD, and the U.S. Air Force, Johnson & Johnson, Google, and others, helping leaders communicate with authenticity and impact. Combining neuroscience and storytelling, John empowers professionals to deliver compelling messages that inspire action. Whether coaching executives or training teams, he equips leaders with the skills to connect, influence, and leave a lasting impression. I have to say, John, I don't know that I've ever heard Navy EOD put on the same level as NASA. And surely I joke because I love my EOD brothers and had a wonderful time serving with them. But how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. I mean, I think the similarity there is they both try not to blow things up when there are people around.
That is good. That is probably a good rule of thumb. And no, the EOD guys, man, that was probably one of my favorite times in the military serving with them. And I got to meet a lot of the Navy guys, and of course different services with EOD. And the one thing I know for sure is they're all absolutely crazy in my opinion, but a good bunch of people doing amazing work. Um, so tell us what led you to want to work with military and service members. Like, where did that drive come from?
Oh, well, so, that's pretty easy because I grew up in the Corps, so Semper Fi. Like, I still stand around sometimes when no one's around and practice my salutes. So I'm like a 6-year-old Marine. I grew up with a dad who was like the great Santini, and I love the Corps. So and my dad was wounded in Vietnam, and he was in severe pain like for the rest of his life, and he just passed a couple years ago in his mid 80s. And I loved being in the military because people we would go to different bases and we would meet different people, and everybody was personable and everybody knew how to get along, and there were all kinds of different people from all kinds of different places in society. And most of the people that we met, because they were used to the same thing, like you meet somebody who's in the military, and they're like, okay, hey, and you're like, you got something in common. Like, I mean, I just thought it was the greatest. And what I love about veterans now, looking back on it, I think part of what played into that, and this is something really important to remember as a veteran, in my opinion, you guys know how to do something like your life depends on it. Go find that anywhere out. And like, that is not common out there. You know what I mean? And so if if you get clear on that and you convey that in one way or another to people that you're looking to work with or whatever, that is significant. And we need more of that.
And I agree with you. I think that's a great point. I think the other thing that veterans bring to the table is a ability to handle stress. In the civilian world, you can see people really freak out over things because to them, and it's an emergency,
Yeah.
and you're sitting there going, I don't know why we're upset. Why are we?
Yeah.
And it's not to take anything away from them. Obviously, the job's important and what have you, but some of the things that we go through, especially if you deploy, you look at things and handle things a little bit different, and you realize that not everything's an emergency, and there's definitely different ways to handle it. And my mentor in the military used to use the phrase, and I love this one, is pressure bust pipes. And I've always tried to keep that in the back of my mind. Is if you can remain calm and try to stay focused, you can accomplish a lot more. And you can tell the people who can't handle pressure because they start
Yeah.
blowing.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. And, I mean, one of the things that I've been saying since I was a little kid, because I kind of got it given my dad's experience, even though I wasn't there, um, is, I'm above ground. It's a good day. I mean, I
Yeah.
could just hear my dad saying that over and over, and it landed over here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it
Better to be seen
definitely
than
takes
viewed.
on new meaning.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, you have John Bates Executive Speaking Success. What is this?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a really quick story, and then I'm going to talk about why I told you this story on a meta level. So here's how it came about. I have always been the guy with the soft skills and, like people skills and relationship skills and all that, speaking, all that. And I always worked with a lot of people who had the hard skills, the finance people and the business people and the, scientists and programmers. And I worked in .com companies starting in 1994. I was always a founder, a co-founder, an early stage employee, and I raised several $100 million with my various teams in Silicon Valley and beyond. But the people that I worked with the hard skills still said, "Oh, John, he does the fluffy stuff." Right? So I
Fluffy
never
stuff.
really valued what I did. And I went around with this chip on my shoulder trying to prove I was valuable while I secretly felt I wasn't valuable, and it was awkward. And then in 2009, I went to the TED conference for the first time, and I just saw person after person give the most unbelievable talks I'd ever heard. And I had two big realizations. The first one was, wow, that's powerful. Like, like call that fluffy if you will, but that is powerful. So I got a new realization for the power of what I brought to the table, which I had never had. I mean, and I was not a young spring chicken even at that point. And the other realization I had is, gee, even though I've always been the best or one of the best speakers at those tech conferences, those were tech conferences, right? The bar was really low. I have not been reaching my full potential as a speaker. There's a long way to go, right? So I came back, got really involved in the TED and TEDx community. And at one of the first ever TEDx events, I was sitting in the audience, part of the team that was putting it on, waiting all day for this guy who had all the hard skills, had the most exciting topic. And when he got up on stage and started to speak, everybody in the room checked out because he was so nervous and awkward that we all thought we were going to throw up for him. And I remember being really sad. And then I got mad because I thought about the people on my team like that and what that must have cost us overall. And then the evil part of me popped out and I was like, oh, hard skills guys, blowing it, calls what I do fluffy, right? Neener, neener. And as I was doing that, my buddy came over and he leaned down and he said, dude, we got to do something to help people like this. And I was just, like, oh my gosh, like I could do that. Like I do have the skills to do that. So that's how I jumped into this. And I went home that night. I ditched the chip on my shoulder for good. And I started working on the training I now do for I got to train all the active astronauts. I pinched myself, EOD, all kinds of unbelievable rooms I've been in since then. And I think what happened that was different that I wouldn't have done any other way that I can think of is I sat down and I thought about that guy and I realized I needed to base all my training in human evolutionary biology and human neurophysiology. In other words, the science of communication, human communication, so that I could show people not only what works, but also why it works based in science. And that just unlocked unbelievable doors for me. And I think the big takeaway that I got out of doing all that work is that communicating with human beings is not logical. You may have noticed. Communicating with human beings is not logical, it's biological. And when you understand the biology, you can make it logical again. But anybody who goes in thinking logic by itself should do the job is just never going to be very effective with human beings. Logic is necessary, yes, but it's not sufficient, right? So that's how this whole thing came about. Like I I mean, and listen, I raised several $100 million with my various teams. I never had a really successful exit. And then right after I started, I went to TED in 2009 and I got invited to speak there in 2010, which was like, oh my gosh, right? And I wasn't on the main stage, I was on a side stage, but it was at the actual TED conference and I blew it. Dude, oh my God, it's embarrassing to just even tell you that. But I blew that first time on the TED stage. And if you want to read a short article I wrote about it, so you can avoid the mistakes I made, just Google John Bates TED fail. I'm the first result. So, but that just spurred my desire to get good at this even harder, And luckily, I got invited to speak at TED a few more times, and again on side stages. And I've spoken at about like 5 or 6 or 7 TEDx events now. I've coached for about 35 TEDx events. I coach for the TED Fellows program. So, I've never worked for TED, but I do that pro bono. But so the key for me was just that realization first that what I had was of value, because I really didn't get that. And then the realization that, wow, this is how I could make a difference. And, one more thing I'll say is that when I started to do this, everybody I knew said, John, you don't want to do that. Like, speaker coaches are a dime a dozen. Like, you'll never make any money. This is a terrible idea, right? And so for about a month, I cried about it and tried to figure out something else to do. And then finally thought, well, I don't know what else to do, so I'm just going to do it. And the first year, I went even further in debt. Like, I started out 50 grand plus in debt and then went further in debt. The second year, I kind of broke even. And the third year, I made more than I ever made in Silicon Valley by quite a bit, and then doubled and tripled that, So I think that the reason to do what you love is not because there's some magic fancy like fairy dust that comes out of it. It's because if you love it, you might be willing to do it long enough that you could succeed at it, right?
Yeah.
Like I tell
And
people,
I
it's easy to be
appreciate
an
that.
overnight success when you've been doing something for 10 years.
But I know, Keith, I know, like, I take pride in my ability to speak in front of people. I also know that a lot of times I rely on my natural ability and don't prepare the way I should, and maybe not give the performance I should. However, both you and I have probably sat through countless briefings by people who should never have been up in front talking to anybody. What do you think about this? How can we apply this to our service members transitioning out?
For me,
For Keith.
Oh, for me,
I
oh,
was
I
going
thought
to
you were asking
say,
that to John.
yeah.
I was like, let the SME answer that. But no, I
Keith
mean,
checked out. He's not participating today.
no, I thought it was for him. No, I mean, well, shoot. I mean, to answer your question, I mean, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I feel like there's almost a perception that veterans, like, we're all General Patton, able to get up there and rally the troops and this, that, and the other. And no, I've seen some of the worst communicating leaders, not even just in speeches or presentations, but just in leadership communication, right?
Right.
I was a leadership instructor in the Army, a senior leadership instructor, and I would always tell my students, the folks I was like, I challenge you to over communicate in your organization. And I
Yeah.
challenge you to challenge others to over, because it won't happen. There's no such thing as too much communication, you know. But that's just the active communicate, or the not the act, but the spirit of the communication, if you will. But then, yeah, communicating effectively, right? No, and I love. I think the military, active duty as well as transitioning, can get a benefit from this kind of stuff, because yeah, like, when we get out, we don't. especially because it's a whole new world, right? We get out of the military. We had our own way of communicating. The military has its own culture, things of that
Yeah,
nature, and now we're pivoting into this whole new world with its own language and its own. And we have to come in here and present ourselves without cursing, without dipping our lip, and without like a professional human being, and that's sometimes very foreign to us. So all that to say, I love that you came from the aspect of the why, right? As an instructor at heart, I've always been, hey, we need to teach people the why behind it, because one, they're going to retain it better, but two, they're going
yeah,
to be more effective and willing to apply it. So this whole neurobiology, evolutionary biology thing is really like, I want to dive into this if you don't mind. So can you dive into more of the understanding of how these sciences improve communication?
absolutely. I will give you the the big mama of them all. Like this is the big one, and for your listeners, I'm going to talk about how this applies, and I'll loop it back even to the story that I told. So, if you look at a cross section of a human brain, what as you look down, what you will see is the brain stem, and then wrapped around that is the midbrain. And it's all more complicated than this, but this all works, right? This is still true. It's just, yes, it's more complicated, but there's the brainstem and the midbrain. And together, those two pieces form what's called the paleo mammalian brain. Paleo because it's old, mammalian because all mammals have it. Your dog, her cat, that guy's ferret, they all have the paleo mammalian brain. And then in humans, the neocortex, the new brain, is wrapped around the outside of that ancient paleo mammalian brain. And so this ancient paleo mammalian brain does not have access to language or logic or reason. That's all in the neocortex, right? But this ancient part of the brain, the paleo mammalian brain, no language, logic, or reason, but it does have access to reality on a fundamentally deeper level than we will ever have access consciously. And here's what I mean by that. This is the part of the brain that smells pheromones, and it sees facial micro expressions, right? And I believe it's the Marine Corps Hunter Killer program where they train people like go with your gut. Like if you look at it and something seems off, find what's off, right? Like don't. Okay, that's your paleo mammalian brain. Like it notices that something's been disturbed over there, even though consciously you don't see that, right? But it does, it knows. So it doesn't have access, this ancient part of the brain doesn't have access to language or logic or reason, so it can't just talk to us. So the way it communicates with us is gut feelings, right? So if nobody ever told you before, I'm telling you now, trust your gut, because that's actually good information from the paleo mammalian brain, which sees things and hears things and smells things and notices patterns in things that we'll never ever be conscious of. But it notices those things, and the way it tells us is through gut feelings, right? So if the elevator door opens and the hair stands up on the back of your neck, don't get in there, right? Because if it's a nice person, they'd want you to trust your gut. And if it's not a nice person, we don't want you in there with them. So that is the paleo mammalian brain versus the neocortex, the new brain. Now, why is this significant? Here's why. Let's go. Let's put the rubber on the road. Tell me if you've ever had an experience like this. Do you like the product? Oh yeah, we like the product. Yes, very good. Do you think it's priced right? Oh yeah, yeah, fair price. Do you think that it would make a difference for you to have it? Oh, certainly, yes, yeah. Well, do you want to sign the check and we'll start delivery? No, we want to think about it for a minute, right? We're not quite ready yet. Okay, you've had that
Yeah.
experience, right?
Hmm.
Because we're human beings. So we've all had that experience, okay? But when millions of dollars are on the line, right? Or when other things that really matter are on the line, people get really mad about that. Yes, 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 no. Were they lying to me? Like what was going on, right? Why would they say yes, 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 and then no? Okay, here's why. It becomes super obvious in hindsight. Yes, 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 no. Logic, 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 emotion. We did not make the emotional connection that would allow them to give us what I call the fourth and most important yes. Okay. So logically, they were all in, but the logical brain is wrapped around the outside of the emotional brain. So to get from the logical brain to the spinal column to send the signal to sign the check, we got to go through the emotional brain, the paleo mammalian brain. And if we have not said something yet that or in some way connected with them, we're somehow in the same tribe, we care about the same things, we've put that paleo mammalian brain at ease somehow, it is going to stop the yes 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 train and give you a no, right? If you want yes 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 yes, we have to have that emotional connection. So that's why I
Yeah.
say logic is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You've
Yeah.
got to make that emotional connection.
I love it, and I liken it to the handshake. What I've actually used that example with folks. You build a
Yes.
binding contract, it'll stand up in a court of law. You can sue over it, but you go to you sign it, everything's good. Lawyers are blessed off on it, and you go to shake the person's hand, and they refuse to shake your hand. Do you have any ounce of trust in that legal document anymore, just because they wouldn't shake your hand, right? And yeah,
Yep.
it's so true. So I love the why. Now our audience has the why. Absolutely love the way you described it. You broke it down in Barney style, layman's terms for us knuckle draggers and ground pounders. So how do we how do we apply this to our communication style to make that emotional connection?
Okay, so perfect question. So there's two quick things I'd like to talk about that. One is the story that I shared with you. The second one is the one I'll start with, which is the fact that I think small talk has been misnamed. Okay, small talk is not actually small talk. We think it's small talk because it seems like it doesn't matter what we talk about. And, so how could it matter? Okay, well, here's what matters. Before the meeting, you are laying the groundwork to get a yes by engaging in small talk about things that connect you, like things you have in common, things, right? Like I had a team that went out and completely failed at raising money, completely 100%. We worked together. They got this concept. They went back out, had a signal that they would not even open the computer to go into the business plan until they had warmed up the room. And on that second run through all the same VCs, at the place where it was their worst meeting ever before, the second time they went in warming up the room, they discovered that everybody at the table had dogs. So they showed each other all their dogs on their phones and pictures of dogs and talked about how much they loved their dogs. That ended up being the VC firm that funded them and then became their lead investor and helped them go get even more money. Okay? It's not logical. It's biological, right? So you can turn that small talk time into big talk by just consciously looking for ways that you can connect with the people you're with, right? What do you have in common? How could you be in the same tribe? What do you both care about? Do you both have daughters in school right now? Like, whatever.
It's like
But
the lawyer with the jury. The lawyer has to make that connection.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that's why I tell that story that I shared with you guys a lot, because and you guys can be the judge of it, right? It's not about what I think, it's about what you think ultimately. But I tell that story to give people a little bit of insight, like, yes, I failed my first time on stage at TED. And now I train people all over the world for TED, right? So it's not about being perfect all the time. And I talk about how I was always jealous of the hard skills people. So that plays pretty well in rooms like NASA and EOD and places like that because there are a lot of hard skills people, and I get to have them immediately from the beginning start to juxtapose the hard skills and the soft skills and think about, well, do I even think public speaking is important? Do I think that communication and the soft skills matter, right? And then I share how, like, I was, judgy and laughing at that guy who was blowing it, and then had my aha moment and got over myself, you know? So
Yeah.
I have found that story, like for me, standing up front, when I go into a room full of C-level or VP level executives, I feel like they all like are clinging to the ceiling with their claws when I walk in. And by the time I'm finished telling that story, they've dropped down to the floor and kind of, like cooled their fur down, and like we can actually talk.
Yeah. I love the application of that. And Sean, we talk so much about in transition well, not even the power, but the importance of networking, right? And I mean how useful this little bit of knowledge could be. Because what do we always tell people when we tell them to network, Sean? What's like the rule when we tell folks to reach out? Like,
What? You
make the
find an
connection,
angel,
right?
find 10?
Well, that too, but right. But when you reach out, don't just send a
Yeah, you
connection
got to make
request
the connection.
blank. Exactly.
Oh yeah, put a note in.
Yeah.
Yeah, the quickest way for me to disconnect with somebody is if the first response is a sale.
Right.
Because
Oh yeah.
I got no time for it. And uh, the funny thing is, like, I love how you broke down small talk being mislabeled, because I hate small talk. I hate idle chit chat. I'm a type D personality. I want the facts. Don't tell me how you made the sausage. Just tell me the sausage is made.
Yeah.
I'm very cut and dry that way. But at the same time, I understand fully the point of making that personal connection.
Yeah.
And I brought up the jury duty thing because I just was on a jury duty selection. So I was sitting there all day long. And the first lawyer made connections with the whole group. And he went on forever. Now he started to make me mad because he went on forever. But
Right.
he did at least make the connection. You could see that people responded to him and they were willing to tell him a whole bunch of stuff and keep talking, which is
Yeah.
one of the reasons it went so long. The next guy got up and was promising to keep it short, but what he failed was he never made a connection. And so he kept it short because nobody wanted to talk to him.
Right. Yeah,
And
Sean, it's so funny because when that team that I was talking about went out raising money the first time, the worst meeting they had, who turned out to be the next go their lead investors, but that worst meeting they had, they went into the office, and the folks they were meeting with said, you know what, we're a little bit behind today. Would you mind just cutting to the chase, because we don't have a lot of time? So you know what they did? They cut to the chase. They went right to the business plan. And it was
Yeah.
the worst meeting out of all the meetings they had. And I told them, I said, you know what I call that? When they say that and then you do that, I call that letting them ruin your meeting. Don't let them ruin your meeting. Like when they say, could you cut to the chase? You say, sure, but you still tell them that thing you need to tell them that's going to open things up and make an
yeah,
emotional connection and get it, because that's what really matters. Don't go right into the business plan.
Yeah.
That's sure way to just get a no.
there's easy ways to tailor a business plan too if you need to shorten it up and things like that. So don't forego the connection piece, and it's so important. Keith, can you? We're already at time, man. Can you
I
believe this?
know. Yeah, I geek out on this stuff, so and I can talk about all day with this, but yeah, no, we are at time, and it breaks my heart, John. Thank you so much for coming on and just sharing a little bit about what you do. So, I mean, there is so much out there that we're just scratching the surface, and our service members and our veterans, I truly believe, yeah, they can learn a whole lot from this information that you're bringing to the table. So, how can folks get in touch with you or reach out for your services or your programs? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
So I'll give you a couple things. One is just my straight up email, because if somebody wants to talk to me, I want to talk to them, of your listeners. So john@johnbates.com. That's pretty simple. And they can find me at LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in/John Bates, just JOHNBATES. I put a lot of good stuff, at least what I hope you'll think is good stuff on LinkedIn. I'm very, it's like a job for me. So if they follow me there, I'd love to get comments. I'd love to hear what they think. I also have a website, johnbates.com. And when you go to that website, you'll get a pop-up to sign up for my free mini trainings. So those are the trainings that I send to NASA and Johnson & Johnson and Google and Intuit and all those people. I will give them free to you if you want them. Every Sunday, I send out, a 1.5 to 2 minute video. And if somebody were to do that for a year, I guarantee you will take 10 rungs on the leadership ladder just by giving me a minute or two every week and then taking that into your week, right?
Nice.
And so those are the main ones. And have them mention the podcast, and I will, put that in the subject line so that I don't miss it, and I will get right back to you. And then, the other thing, Keith and Sean, if you'd like, is I've got 2 documents that I think are some of the most valuable things I've ever created, honestly. And I would be happy to give them to you. You could put them up in the show notes or something. They're about finding and crafting your origin story, because that is one of the messages I would like to get to people who are transitioning out of the military is please sit back, be generous with yourself, read these documents, answer these questions, and then put together a real short origin story about why you love doing what you love doing, right? Why did you go into the military? Why did you do your MOS? Why did you care about all that stuff? And what does that matter to me, the person who's considering employing you or partnering with you or whatever?
Yeah.
Because that origin story is just the absolute key to blessed connection. And so, if you guys want that, I will give it to you.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. And I would really encourage people to get that origin story, tell it to friends, hone it, get it really good, and then open with that. When they say, well, so Keith, tell me about yourself. Like, boom, out comes
Boom,
that
there it is.
origin story that you have purposefully prepared for this use. And it lets them know who you are, why you care, what they can expect from you. And people just connect with that.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, we would absolutely love to have that document and get it out there. So, yeah, amazing stuff you're doing, John. Thank you so much for
Thank
all that
you.
you're doing. Thank you for your father's service and your sacrifice, even while he was serving as well. And on, just on behalf of everybody, what you're doing is absolutely amazing. And admittedly, I said it earlier, and I'm a violator of that rule. I sent you a LinkedIn connection request this morning, and there was no message attached to it. So I apologize. If you wouldn't mind accepting that, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn as well.
I would not mind at all.
All right. All right, everybody. On behalf of the VET S.O.S family, thank you to everyone for joining us today. VET S.O.S is growing and spreading its wings. You can follow us on all the social media platforms. Make sure to check out all 3 of our shows, and I think there's a couple more coming out here soon. And follow and subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts from. We're on YouTube, Reach Across America Radio, The Parade Deck, and all your favorite podcast platforms. And as always, folks, remember, don't drown in the sea of transition. Grab the VET S.O.S Lifeline.